We plan to make the recording available on pmfair.org, the first site where you should have been finding out details about the theme and perhaps registering as well. If it's okay with Marcus, we will make the presentation available, or a version of that available as well. If you keep your microphone on mute, I'm happy to put your camera on so we can see you. You can type your questions in the chat. We can pick them up at the end when we have the time at the end, and we'll be publishing things like the PDU code in the chat as well. So watch out for the chat in the middle of the bottom bar, at least on my screen, with the little red dot if something comes up there. On the next screen, we have the PDU code. Good, I put it in this time. We have that PDU code there, so make a note of that. I will, as I say, paste it in the chat so that you can copy and paste that and claim it on the URL that's there. And I think I'm nearly done. What's the next one? Over to you, Marcus. Take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So good day, everyone, and welcome. I'm really glad that you were able to join at lunchtime. I mean, everybody's probably already looking forward to lunch, but I hope that will be insightful to you here this session. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad that you found the time to join. I will obviously talk about the topic of sustainability and how it plays also a role in project management. And first of all, I mean, when thinking about sustainability, then of course we think about, like, usually I would say about like natural environments. Now we think kind of green nature, climate change, and so forth, right? I mean, we have seen that also on the PM Fair website. It's quite greenish there. So there's, however, much more to it, I think, as you know, sustainability refers, of course, to environmental topics, etc., but also, I think, to social and economic aspects, right? And that's what I'm also trying to dive a little bit deeper in today. And in this context, I will today talk about project resilience, which is a bit of a kind of a novel term and not sufficiently explored, I think. And I will walk you through how this actually links pretty much with the topic of sustainability, as I think it is important to protect our established environments also from a economic point of view. But first, let me first introduce myself. So, I mean, first and foremost, I'm a project manager. I do have over 25 years of experience in projects, mainly within the financial services industry. I have of that about 12 years of experience as a project program manager. I have a strong background in technology, so my expertise is certainly in IT projects, having delivered their various transformation projects as well, and programs internationally. And here, as I said, mainly in the financial services in this industry, primarily in the compliance domain. And I will get back to this shortly, because that links kind of to my topic today as well. So you could say that over the years, I have developed some sort of an obsession, if you want, for the innovation and evolution of the project management practice. And I did a lot of research, you know, exploring the field of disruptive technologies and techniques such as artificial intelligence and data analytics, how to bring that into the project management domain to address today's challenges in effectively delivering projects, I think. So based on this, I also developed an approach based on project resilience, for which I actually today I provide training and coaching to project leaders and teams, now to prepare actually for a transition to what I think is required in today's more complex environments. I'm also involved as a co-founder and product lead in a Swiss technology firm, Fortian. I am based in Switzerland. And that is about making use of AI and analytics in the project management space. And this way, the aim is obviously here to improve the effectiveness of project delivery and management. But enough about myself right now. So I want to dive into this topic, sustainability and project management. And so as that theme of that conference is around sustainability and social responsibility, I'm sure also with the previous sessions, I'm sure you're already well familiar with what sustainability implies, in the context of project management, obviously. But as I said before, now usually when thinking about sustainability, and we think about natural environments, we think green, nature, etc., right? Climate change, these kind of topics. And I think, as I said before, right, there's much more to it, right? Sustainability refers also to social, economic, and administrative aspects. And that's the diagram here that I've actually borrowed from APM, as I think it's, in my view, it's the most complete when talking about sustainability and project management. So forgive me, PMI, but I think that's a quite complete diagram in this context. And it resonated with me because projects are vehicles for change, right? And basically any change in an organization. And any change is something new, right? That we throw out there, that gets delivered from projects. And often actually it's building on something existing already. So I think that sustainability is, of course, as we all know, it's a responsibility, but it's also a responsibility that project outputs and outcomes are sustainable in the sense that they contribute effectively to environmental sustainable, such as energy, efficiency and biodiversity, while also supporting social aspects such as human rights, equality, etc. But just because of such responsibility, right, I think it is important that project management as a discipline evolves, right? And this ensures basically that projects actually can deliver on such targets, and that project management evolves just like our society and our environments and business environments as well, that progress and evolve. So today's environments became very dynamic and complex, which are actually characteristics for progress, I think. And the discipline of project management needs to evolve along with those environments, with social changes, with economic changes. So on one side, to ensure that what we have achieved, we can actually maintain and is not being jeopardized. And in addition, obviously, that projects become true catalysts and drivers for change, for further progress, which, if we are honest, often projects are not really delivering on those terms. So why do I say that? So especially with the pace that we see today with digitization and this increasing importance of data, and I mentioned disruptive technology before. So business environments are changing, and they're changing much faster than ever before, right? And it became much more dynamic. And as a consequence, in project management, we are facing more often, rather unforeseen risks, right? And the world has become more complex and more uncertain. So we see more risks and also more disruption going on, which is not always a positive thing. And the result is often that projects are not getting delivered on their defined targets. So often projects are actually missing to meet all the different expectations or defined expectations. And you may have seen surveys, I'm sure you have seen that from PMI, for example, regarding project success rates. I think there's a yearly survey in the pulse of the profession from PMI, where it talks also about the project success rates across industries, right? And we see it also from other bodies like APM or KPMG I've seen before, where there's sometimes also talk about challenged projects. And this is defined as projects delivered with some sort of a trade-off, right? So for example, a project got delivered on time, but overran on cost, or vice versa. And other projects actually that turn out to be huge successes in terms of their provided value, but actually completely overran in terms of cost or schedule. And you may, as an example, you may remember there was in London, London Heathrow Airport Terminal 5 opening. That was in 2008, I believe. It was quite some hiccup there with some IT system where a lot of passengers got stranded and bags got lost, etc. So from a project management point of view, it was quite disastrous towards the end of or when the project got delivered. But overall, it's actually deemed a very successful project because it provided significant value. So there are obviously different viewpoints, right? But again, you may wonder right now how that actually links all to sustainability. So as I've mentioned earlier, when I introduced myself, I have worked many years in financial services in the regulatory compliance area, which is certainly one of the more critical areas. And it means also that delivering projects on target is very important as well. There's really important to deliver on regulatory mandates, and these are very often really time bound, and anything that comes in late that could cost not only a financial services firm or a bank a huge fines or any other penalties. It could also cause some problems in terms of that a bank or financial services firm is actually open for criminal activities, right? So obviously, this is not what the economy as such wants to actually address or get to, right? So, and I used to be a project manager for financial crime compliance. So in the compliance area and on the IT side. And this included frequent changes to systems that are actually helping to avoid any sort of money laundering, for example, or fraud, or other sort of financial crimes that could threaten actually not only the existence of the bank, but actually an entire economy. And that's why there are these regulatory bodies, obviously, who actually observe financial services firms and banks in particular to make sure that these kind of activities are being monitored and addressed properly. And you may have heard or read here and there, right, in the news about huge fines to banks, right? Over the last 10 years, I believe there were about 26 billion US dollar of fines that were set by regulatory governmental bodies against financial institutions because of some lax or outdated measures to spot and address financial crime activities, such as money laundering. So it's, if regulatory bodies don't really wouldn't monitor this properly, and banks in particular wouldn't really follow this strictly, then this could, as I said, it could threaten an entire economy. So it's really critical, right? And if you look at the numbers here of how much money usually gets laundered every year, undetected, right? Then you could realize that this could have a significant economic impact. So it's no surprise that regulatory bodies are very rigid and very strict in those matters. And many failures can be linked also to the missing flexibility and agility of projects, to adhere to that speed of change, which especially in such areas is constantly increasing because whoever wants to launder money or do any other financial crime activities, they explore any possibilities, new technologies, etc. So projects, especially on the technology side, they need to basically evolve with that as well, with this development on the technology side. And having in mind that projects are vehicles to implement change, then projects certainly have that responsibility to not only deliver change, but delivering projects in the most effective way. And that means to develop also a robustness and resilience to better respond to today's uncertainty that often actually causes turbulence and disruption. And you're probably familiar with the term VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So it is what organizations and projects in particular are actually quite impacted by. And effectively, today's business environments and organizations, they became way more complex and nonlinear due to way more activities, way more dependencies, and also an exponential increase of those dynamic parameters that define actually the direction of an organization. And naturally that has an impact on project management. And project management, used to be based on a rather mechanical and deterministic view, let's say, following more traditional processes. So today there are definitely many more opportunities for success of projects, but also for failure, which makes forecasting in projects actually way more complex and way more difficult. So business conditions and their parameters, they change way more often than before, and this way are often not really foreseeable. And the result is, of course, that directions for the delivery of projects became way more obscure, and projects cannot get planned anymore in a way where a delivery date that is in a rather distant future can be committed to with full confidence. In fact, any project delivery date, as we know, is rather an estimate for something in the future, and therefore cannot be 100% committed, so with absolute certainty. And coming back to the example in financial services, right? This makes the job for a project manager obviously even more difficult because there's less planning safety due to today's uncertainty and this fast-moving environments. But when it comes to sustainability, projects have a responsibility to develop measures to address such problems, look for innovative ways to solve those dilemmas and develop actually an agility to become more adaptive to those fast-changing business environments. And this also requires, I think, a redefinition of the term resilience. And resilience usually is defined along the lines of bouncing back from something unforeseen, a disruptive event which couldn't be foreseen, and bring something back to its original state. So in other words, not just taking a punch, right? Maybe stumbling a little bit, but then get back to standing straight and just continuing with the original plan. And I believe that for project management, this kind of definition is a little bit outdated, requires adjustment. Considering that a punch could be something that could change the direction of our project, or in other words, now the original plan may not be appropriate anymore and a better plan emerges, right? We should not just go back to the original plan and proceed. And for that reason, I think we need to rethink the term resilience in the context of project delivery. So you may call it as well agility, but I think actually personally that agility is a way to become more resilient altogether and also look for opportunities, obviously, but not only for one particular project, but for all project management practice. And I tried to show this here in this model that shows different stages to achieve such maturity and what I think true project resilience. I'll call it even strategic resilience. I sometimes call it this way. And the aim really is to make projects successful again, and reestablish basically project delivery confidence and a sustainable performance. So also having in mind this these rather low project success rates that we usually see to address that as well. And I believe that many project delivery shops, they're currently in some type of survival mode, where value delivery, right, rarely happens. But the priorities are rather at the level where most people are just busy with dealing with all this complexity, and they are rather busy with themselves even, right, focusing on their own performance, their own career progress, maybe even kind of ticking the boxes of delivering on time and on budget, without having really the actual value delivery as a primary aim. And a lot of projects get delivered but actually produce no value or limited value, but for political reasons maybe are just being followed through. So I see in this kind of firefighting mode, let's call it, right? So I see two levels here, and that's random and reactive, and I will talk a little bit more about this in a minute. But where I think project management practices generally should go to, or should be located, is actually in the upper part here of this model, where teams are more anticipative and adaptive by embracing uncertainty and complexity, rather than trying to fight it and avoid risk by all means, like oh, this is like really something bad, just go away, right? Uncertainty, complexity, we don't want it. But no, uncertainty always will be there. And in the age of digitalization, I mentioned disruptive technology, AI, machine learning, all these kind of things. So these technology advancements, right? Things will definitely not get easier. And I think we need to just start taking advantage of it in the project management domain. So today, I think we kind of try to steer complexity and uncertainty, and I mean all this basically what's VUCA related, and try to steer it in a way that it fits us, right, or our project goals, right, which I think personally is actually wrong. I don't think it's even possible, and I think actually it rather should be the other way around. Now we need to be steered by complexity, uncertainty, which is not necessarily a negative thing. It sounds horrible, right? Just like we get steered by complexity, right? I mean, it's like we are just sitting here and waiting for orders, but there are opportunities, right, that are worth exploring in all this. So in this, and I will talk about this in more details in a minute, I see three levels that I believe are worth for project teams to climb up to, and that's anticipative, adaptive, and advanced. So let's look at this, and I labeled those like just to illustrate it a little bit more, how I think what the characteristics are of these different levels, right? So the lowest level I have called the gambler, where I believe some teams and organizations are still operating in this mode, unfortunately. And this level is kind of like playing the lottery, right? As there's at this stage, right, there's usually a lack of proper control and a lack of diligence, when it comes to managing project risks, right? And project risk management here, and I've seen that in some places, it's kind of treated like some routine job, right? That is run in isolation, maybe just by the project core team, or maybe even by the project manager alone, just to get it done, tick it off, right? And just do it like as a routine job, right? Without really getting a broader view on this. And this is also usually the case with when they're disconnected teams, so working in project silos, with no real alignment between teams. Even a PMO function might be missing here, right? And knowledge and information that obviously exists in the different teams, right? It's not really shared, and project teams may discover valuable information only by accident, and like you just meet some ex-colleague over coffee and say, oh, this happens there and there, right? And there's some valuable information which usually should be shared formally instead of just having this informal conversations where you discover things by accident. So hence there's a massive unknown and uncertainty, right? So again, uncertainty and unknowns, they always will exist, right? But this is kind of homemade, where we build this massive unknown and uncertainty. We just increase it without need, right? So what happens here usually as well is that project stakeholders see then provided delivery dates as something that is kind of like written in stone, and it's like a guarantee provided by the project team. And we all know that this is not possible really, right? But then how do we address that? I mean, a date needs to be given somewhere. We cannot just go with a project and say, yeah, we deliver whenever, right? But then we usually address this by giving some randomly calculated contingency reserve, and then hope for the best that it will be enough to deliver the project on target. Maybe we just move it out as far as possible, as far as people actually accept that, just to make sure that we can deliver on that target, right? But we're not really thinking about does that really make sense from a value proposition point of view. So the focus here should be awareness now for all project team members and stakeholders to understand how outdated and problematic such method actually is, and how it could cause significant harm to an organization's effectiveness and actually even the competitiveness. So it could even, in worst case, affect organizational stability. So that's the random, the reactive one. That's what I call the illusionist. So I think actually most organizations and teams are operating today at this level, which is more like a reactive level. And at this level, teams are probably operating in an agile mode. And the problem here is actually that managers think that, or many managers think that agile is about methods and processes, which is actually true, right? It is about methods and processes, but it's often applied too strict and almost used like a blueprint that gets copied and pasted, to different teams. And it is kind of an illusion that now being agile is like the silver bullet to success and provides sufficient flexibility, right? Because I was talking before, like, yeah, we're not flexible enough, etc., right? So yeah, we are agile, so what, right? But it's not, being agile is not the silver bullet to this, right? And it does not provide sufficient flexibility. And you may have seen this yourself in some places when agile methods are prescribed, like a trendy thing, that it needs to get done, because everybody else does it. So we need to become agile. So while applying agile is really not the wrong thing. So really don't get me wrong, I'm not against agile. It's definitely the right way of doing it, but it is often missing an alignment to organizational structures and challenges and the evolution of those challenges and environments. So what is required is not only a flexible way of managing projects, but on top of it, an agility, which is different from being agile. So agility that connects much broader across the organization, or expert stakeholders, if you will, at different levels. Today, many teams that just follow predefined processes to respond to change that comes, right, during the project life cycle and causes any change of direction. And there is obviously, especially with agile methods, there is a flexibility to correct directions, right, for course correction. But it's still too rigid, because coming back to that increasing complexity, it causes, first of all, causes more frequent corrections of directions and the course of the project, and therefore actually needs basically a constant revalidation of existing knowledge. It also means that any change is becoming more disruptive, more significant, right? Like, it's not like we're just changing a little bit here, adjusting. There are coming some changes along which are actually quite disruptive because of this increasing complexity and uncertainty. So we're living in that world, right, of higher uncertainty, which means then that change can be or is becoming more disruptive. And traditional agile methods cannot absorb any change in a fast enough way. So that means it costs time and speed of responsiveness. And in addition, teams are rather unprepared for disruptive events, as most changing conditions actually are hitting the project then by surprise. So being agile addresses obviously this to correct direction, but due to the lack of speed, such disruptive events could actually even derail a project. So the focus here should be a report with a broader audience of stakeholders to ensure a sound alignment in terms of the response to disruptive events. So essentially, there needs to be a continuous adaptation and kind of building synergies between the what and the how by building better connections and alignment. This brings us to what I call the sailor. So this level is all about anticipation. So in other words, not to predict and foresee events and also risks and opportunities that you otherwise actually probably would miss. And here the project team applies concepts of scenario thinking by taking really like a 360-degree view of the project and anything that actually impacts the project, and enabling like improved readiness for the unexpected. So there, if you're familiar with scenario thinking, it includes various techniques, right, to integrate insights from a broader audience to determine then driving and restraining forces in a project. And that we start there first working individually and then as a group and develop basically these techniques to and apply those techniques to frame, scope, and develop various scenarios that would be baked and into the project planning activities. And obviously with the aim to be better prepared for various scenarios that can happen. In addition, analytical and probabilistic methods will be applied, right, to make sense of data, information, past events, historical projects, right, enabling this way more like a forward-looking perspective that focuses then on a proactive prevention and, as I said, a preparedness for the unknown. So using those techniques, a project would get an outside view, which on top of what we usually call an inside view, right? And that could be then a door opener for further opportunities. And here at that level, the focus should be on the development of mindfulness, right? To integrate those more quantitative methods with qualitative views. So essentially a hybrid between insights from data and analytical models on one side and human experience and knowledge on the other. So it requires certainly a kind of a shift of behaviors, right, to leverage, organize, and treat data and information the way it should be treated so that it can actually incrementally provide insights. So helping them to predict scenarios that otherwise would be rather hidden or unknown. And the next level is the change explorer. That's what I called this. So this level is characterized by an adaptive mindset, really. And that means to have that ability to not only absorb and recover from disruptive events, which is more like the nature of resilience, but also adopting an agility that amplifies actually adaptability and the responsiveness in those times that we're in, which is really turbulent because of the disruption. And that means instead of fighting uncertainty and the resulting turbulence, project teams actually then develop ways to adapt to it and identify opportunities. So project leaders and teams, this way they can sharpen their view by developing a changed mindset. So threats or blockers can become opportunities. I mean, there will be disruptive events that are actually threats and they're really negative and they are blockers and we should mitigate them. But there are others which actually open doors for opportunities. So the key focus is here on outcomes. And, as I said, while some disruptions could have a devastating impact on output, there could be actually an opportunity for outcomes and the value delivery. So as an example, just a simple example, right? Let's say we're in a software development project. So instead of asking where all the scoped features developed, are they completed? So instead of this, you may want to ask, how many features can we deliver now, today? And it gives a completely different spin. It's basically you focus more on the value rather than in the outcome, rather than the output. So it is effectively a different mindset. Obviously, it's a simple example, but it is eventually a different mindset that can have a bigger impact, or will have a bigger impact, and would get adopted by the entire team. And that means all the project stakeholders, including, which ultimately also would redefine the term failure from today, what we see more like as something overly negative. And that would be basically redefined to something that actually rather means opportunity and progress. It requires a constant assessment and re-evaluation of a project situation. And we may have some failures along the way, but as a whole, we actually progress and we actually explore opportunities. And that's basically what the direction it should go to. Finally, the futurist. Right? This stage ultimately is really to establish what I call strategic resilience at the end, right? And that is to reach a sustainable approach to project delivery by then applying the concepts of evolution and forward thinking. So here's a discipline of project management will continuously will be developed and updated with new learnings and experience, ensuring they're really in alignment with the changing business conditions. And the main focus here is really to enhance and strengthen the structure and the behaviors in project teams and all the different project stakeholders, right? To establish actually a culture of sharing and collaboration, and behaviors and processes, of course, as well, to maintain that knowledge and ultimately also that wisdom, right? That projects continuously actually produce and generate. So here needs to be obviously it's also kind of a change in mindset to really look at the evolutionary aspect of project management, which requires definitely a direction, or let's say a stronger direction in terms of sharing and collaboration. So coming back to what I said in the beginning, right? We live in a VUCA world, and some may see it as something temporary, which is or maybe some even link it to the pandemic, right? Which is obviously wrong, right? Really make no mistake here. I mean, VUCA is nothing temporary, right? And it's not a bad thing. Now, the increasing complexity, uncertainty is actually a sign for progress. That's the way we should look at it, right? It's a sign that the world is moving forward and it's evolving. So if we look at it as something negative, something to eliminate, right? Like I mentioned before, right? Like, I don't want the uncertainty, I don't want the complexity, right? So it's all a bad thing, then this is a wrong mindset, and it will lead to failure at the end. I mean, true failure. And we are living in a new normal, and we have more new normals in front of us. And that's actually the whole point of evolution. So in projects, we will constantly face turbulence and disruption. And it's something simply to adapt to, right? To take that war right and make it really worthwhile, right? And so to do this, actually, we need to establish ways so that we can focus on the value. If you look at this here, this roller coaster ride, right? So really look at the value that it will actually provide, right? And instead of just surviving this and hoping for the best. So really see it like this roller coaster ride here, right? Build those methods and mechanisms so you can actually focus on on the value of that right, instead of thinking, when the hell will I get out of here? So keep in mind that projects have, and I mentioned it also earlier, I mean, and we all know this, have a responsibility, and they have actually a responsibility towards innovation, efficiency, and effectiveness. And this is what you could call kind of a prerequisite to build actually sustainability through projects. And sustainability recognizes this interdependence, right, between companies and the broader society, and also these aspects of environment, like environmental issues like climate change, etc., society like education or labor practices, and economy like fair competition or anti-money laundering, what I mentioned earlier. So projects deliver outcomes that have an impact on all those aspects. And many times inefficiency as well as the ineffectiveness of projects, there could have actually a significant impact on any of those factors. So to ensure that projects continue producing sustainable outcomes, and we don't give like a burden to the next generations, right? And the next generations of project management professionals, we need to evolve and adapt to changing conditions. And this is where I think a project resilience or strategic project resilience or agility, whatever you want to call it right now, comes in and supports the team to meet the project goals, not only in an efficient way, like meeting cost and time targets, by overcoming disruption, but also in an effective way. And that means really meeting the value goals of projects. Okay, thanks a lot for your attention. I hope really this presentation was insightful to you, and I hope it was worth to take your time during the lunchtime to attend this. I mean, it's certainly something that is difficult to fit into a presentation of, what do we have, 40 minutes. But I mean, if you're interested to discuss this topic any further, maybe even your specific experience, and maybe discuss further this approach that I highlighted here, I would be more than happy to hear from you. So I have listed here my contact details. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email. So again, thanks a lot for your attention. And if you have some immediate questions right now, I'm happy to answer right now as part of the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Very, very informative. I kind of joked that I liked the gambler profile. It sounds like fun, huh? Every day is different, seat of your pants, high energy. But yeah, I guess that's clearly not sustainable, but sometimes it's fun. And sometimes PM Fair feels a little bit like that as well.
Yeah.
We have some questions in the chat. If anybody wants to ask any, feel free, raise your hand or unmute and ask. There's a good question from PMI Luxembourg chapter, which is actually Xavier. I don't know if he wants to ask it, but I can read it. How to grow on your ladder? I mean, the 5 profiles are clear, the evolution is clear, but what are the skills you need to make your project team or your company go to those upper steps?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I obviously tried to address here at the more high level. And that's what I mentioned. It's not really fitting all into this time here to go through this in detail, but I mean, there are different measures, right? I mean, it needs to be trained. It's mainly a kind of a cultural or mindset change in a way, right? And one, for example, that I mentioned was more like this anticipative view, right? And that, for example, requires that we look at technology a little bit different, right? And data look at that different, right? And many people are saying, oh, that's for technology teams, right? Because it's not with us, right? It's data, so don't bother, right? It's IT team who needs to resolve it, right? So that's how many teams actually think, and I've heard that a lot of times, right? So, but it's kind of where something which is called data literacy comes in, right? Which affects everyone in the organization, not even only project teams, right? It affects IT teams, it affects business teams, any stakeholders, the project sponsor, up to the CEO, everyone in the organization, because it is a different mindset, because it gives you a better view on what, it will give you the view on what value this actually can provide, right? And that drives basically a lot of, the strategies that are being laid out in organizations, right? And there's then nobody who could say, no, this is your job and this is my job and you do that and this with data, and data is not my thing, right? It's not going to happen in any other way. So everybody needs to be on the same page. So that's one example, right? But I mean, the core point is, or the key element of all this is really like to get away from this more, I wouldn't call it like output way of thinking, because I mean, we think in many ways already more on outcomes, but we have to look at differently at these elements of complexity and uncertainty, right? And more ask different questions. So it's, as I said, it's kind of a mindset change, right? And this triggers different questions, or should trigger different questions from people, which opens up new doors, right? So yeah, you can call it like trainings, or I mean, at the end, it's a cultural change, and everybody has to be on the same page. That's the first step at all, right? So everybody needs to understand that and be aware of this, right? And that's what these stages basically should show, right? That you start actually rather low and build some awareness, right? So that everybody has that understanding. Then you go up the ladder, and then you actually adopt some new techniques like scenario thinking, right? Which is usually happening only like more strategic levels, but we have to apply it actually also at the lower levels and or technical levels in projects. And then you go up with more techniques like what I mentioned, this anticipative view, right? So this is kind of incremental. It's not like you're jumping from one to the top, right? And get everything through, right? You have to incrementally build this up. And that's basically what I tried to show. But it's difficult to bring this all into one presentation in this time frame.
Yeah, understood. And again, you mentioned your contact details so people can reach out. But
Sure.
Xavier, I think that addresses your second question as well. Willem was quite active in the chat, and I was wondering how I could summarize his questions, but he's raised his hand, so he can do it himself. But a bit like you said there, agile starts in the boardroom. This starts in the boardroom. It has to be led from the top, and that's how the culture changes.
Yes.
But Willem, feel free to unmute. And I particularly like your VUCA reflection, as it were, your alternative acronym on how to deal with it. Hopefully you'll cover that in your question or discussion as well.
Unmute, this works better. That was actually my question, because I've seen some agile transformations already in different companies, and the agile transformation mainly happens at the IT level, and the rest of the company doesn't move. And I think, do you have any best practices or any tips to get it into the boardroom? Because it actually needs, if you want to make your company really agile, you should do some organizational changes too, because you need to work around your products. Your company should be product centric or customer centric, and the team should be organized around that, because you're actually want to deliver value, and the value stands. You know that if you want to have value, you need to invest. So those teams need to have their own budget. So actually, you should delegate those budgets responsibilities to the lower levels. How do you see that? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point that you bring up there, right? Because I have seen that also, as you're saying, that agile is more seen on an IT side usually, right? And I've seen organizations where actually agile is in the boardroom, but kind of discussed like, okay, we have to apply it with our IT teams, right? So kind of what I mentioned earlier, kind of we have to do that. And that team needs to adopt it, right? Not us, right? We're not IT, right? This is with these and these teams, right? With IT, which is wrong, right? And I think the misconception comes from what I tried also to explain is that I mean, it's kind of a trendy thing, right? Everything is agile, you know, and we have agile transformation. Everybody talks about it. And then we just jump on the wagon and do the same thing, right? And I have seen that actually, where actually it's get prescribed. You have to do agile. I mean, first of all, from a project management point of view, that's nonsense, right? Because, you know, from a methodology point of view, because the project manager should be in charge to understand, do I go agile or scrum or anything like this, or should I do some traditional approach, right? That should be in that perspective. That's the first thing. And the second thing is then, this prescription thing, what I mentioned, right? That this is obviously something that it cannot be prescribed. It needs to be really built into the culture. And that's where really I agree with you. It needs to basically go into the mindset of also from the board level and anyone, not only IT, but basically an entire organization. So my approach would be, and I don't have right now like a blueprint of doing that, but I think the term agile or being agile it's overused in a way that it's really going too much into that IT direction, right? And that's where I think the term agility, and we hear also a lot about business agility, right? That and you read a lot more right now, more recently, right? Which comes up, and which is an approach which basically says exactly what you're saying, right? It's not an IT only thing. It affects the entire organization, and that needs to be further explored at all levels in an organization, also at the board level, and apply this properly, right? So it's an easy thing to say. So as I said, I don't have right now like a blueprint how to actually do that. But the first thing is just like with other items that I mentioned on that ladder. It's something that needs to be built up with awareness, right? And what actually the value that we get out of this, what it actually brings.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, because we had a transformation, and it was like a transformation of the IT that went to agile, but it should have been a complete business transformation, because you need to reorganize the company to work, or a part of the company, because if you have a company that is there for years, you still have your legacy things. And that generates your basic profit, and you should have a space where you can experiment with new things and then integrate them in the existing stuff. And that's lots of people don't understand.
I mean, what I often see is also like people say we do some agile transformation and then change the processes and then send people to trainings and then everybody just has to run it right this way. And that's, I think, is not happy. It's not possible this way, right? You cannot just.
It's a big waste of money.
Exactly. So I think it's really like you have to actually start with all cultural aspects actually to turn it around, right? And or make that change, right? And that's where it should start. To actually, you have to convince everybody, every single person, that this is the way to go, and give that person the big picture, right? Which usually is not happening.
And what they do, they say, this is the agile book. It's like you're trying to swim. This is the book on swimming. Take the book, and they push you in the pool.
Exactly.
And it doesn't.
We don't have enough money or enough staff to deliver waterfalls, so do it agile, guys. You've been on your train.
and to come back what Brian said on the alternative VUCA, it's kind of to stay in the COVID vocabulary, it's the vaccine for VUCA. You need to. The volatility, the uncertainty, complexity, and the ambiguity, you should try and get rid of it by having a clear vision, a clear understanding what world you're in, create clarity for everybody so everybody knows where he's going, and then adapt where necessary. Because we had a discussion yesterday too, and it always comes back on the traditional way of project management and agile. And they said, you have a plan, and then to prove their points, they show the project plan, and they say, this is a project plan. It will never be delivered at this date. Sure, because the plan is a snapshot, and planning process is what
Yes.
makes project management work.
Guys, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt there. We're running out of
Yeah.
time. I just want to do a wrap up. Excellent, Marcus. Thank you very much. Lots of discussion. If we can tab through just the final slides, I'll be quick. Thank you again to our sponsors. I said a lot of them at the beginning, so I won't say much more. The next one, I will say while this is going through, yep, 3 chapters. We said that at the beginning as well, quite a lot, so I won't go into detail there. There's your PDU code and the PDU claim. If anybody misses that, get in touch with me. Marcus's details are on pmfair.org through to LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out to Marcus if you want to carry on that discussion there as well.
Or tomorrow, if you come to Luxembourg, to the Luxembourg event.
Marcus is going to be there as well.
Panelists, yeah.
Okay, so that leads me nicely into the penultimate slide. There is one more event today. Stuart, who is with us here now, it's too late to register for that, but I've been a bit cheeky and posted the Zoom code here. So that's the Zoom code for the next session today. And we have lots more sessions planned tomorrow, some virtual ones that weren't originally on the list because they were planned to be physical. But also the Luxembourg event, as Xavier's just mentioned, is taking place for Luxembourg members in physical with a drink and meet the speakers tomorrow evening. So again, if register for those sessions, any problems, contact us and we will get you the codes and the registration, whatever details you need. The more the merrier there. Thank you. Stuart, I don't know if you want a quick word.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brian. Well, it'd be great to welcome you later on at 4:30 Belgian Luxembourg time to talk a little bit about scaling up individual climate action. So if you're up for that, please come along.
I think the next
And
slide,
same,
Marcus.
the after-sales services of Stuart will be also on Thursday, on Friday.
Super. You get all the gig guys. I think I need to come to Luxembourg. It sounds like that's going to be fun.
Not too late. If you start by foot, it's not too late. I'll take the train.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Xavier, for supporting the good questions with them and the team. Marcus, excellent presentation. Thank you very much. As I said,
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Very good.
Thanks. Bye.